Welcome to a very spooky edition of Put Up Your Spooks.
It's Summerween. The theme this week is Halloween. Why? Well, we just got back from Midsummer Scream, the Halloween convention in Long Beach. And believe it or not, for us dyed-in-the-wool, black and orange, Halloween-loving fiends, this is about the time when we start getting antsy and counting down the days to that sweet, sweet Halloween. This week, I'm presenting an episode of Tales from the Darkside, which I'm pumped about because we don't get to cover a lot of Tales from the Darkside. It doesn't get a lot of love. It really is a second-rate, kind of also-ran show, which makes it that much cheesier and delightful. I'm tired of these Goosebumps episodes and Are You Afraid of the Dark with all their slick production values. When you look at a list of all-time best Tales from the Darkside episodes, you will often find the few focused on Halloween. And we're going to explore one of those tonight in an episode called Trick or Treat, written by George Romero. The episode starts off in a dark back room with an old man, Mr. Hackles, who is meeting with some accountants. Now, it's explained that this is at 3 in the morning, and he does his accounting at 3 in the morning so it won't interfere with business hours. He is such a miser that he actually charges one of the accountants for a second cup of coffee. He shows the men the first penny he ever earned 67 years ago. He has it framed, and he has a huge stack of IOUs. Almost everyone in the town owes him, and he mocks them all.
Those people in this valley are content to be downtrodden slaves to their crops, slaves to the weather. They're careless little people, leading careless little lives.
Some might think it careless to keep a fortune hidden about in canvas sack.
I don't trust banks. I don't trust anyone.
After he takes an IOU from the accountant for the cup of coffee, he freaks out, and the lights start flickering, and he's shouting about, it's cold, can't you feel that? The dark.
The sudden coldness in the room.
What is it, Miss Angle? What is it? In the
The lights! No! It's coming closer!
And then this gray, scabrous skull monster flies down at the accountants, and Mr. Hackle starts laughing his ass off. This is just one of his props, and he tells the guys that it's Halloween, his favorite season. We see his shop the next day, and he runs everything off strings and wires. It's all done with these Rube Goldberg contraptions, because he's such a miserable, miserly guy that he just doesn't want any employees. And so he kind of builds everything himself, does everything himself. He only trusts himself. A farmer, Mr. Kipple, and his son Billy come in, and they're making a payment on their debt. It is very clear that their farm has been signed over to Mr. Hackles as collateral. So the farmer says that they won't be coming by the house that night, but Mr. Hackles says it's a tradition, and he insists that all of his customers stop by his house on Halloween and send their children in, because he hides the IOUs in there. And if the kids can go in, they get a chance to find the IOU and cancel their parents' debt. Still, Mr. Kipple refuses, because he's heard that no one has ever found an IOU, and he's heard that what happens to the children. Mr. Hackles insists that the IOUs are there and that he's never harmed a single child.
You'll succeed, as long as you remember never to listen to your heart. Never lose sight of your goal. And remember, there's nothing as powerful as money.
In walks another debtor, Mr. Muldoon, and he comes in and says his boy will be there that night, and he's going to win because he's toughened him up with a strap. Mr. Hackles is delighted at the news. He rushes home, and starts setting up his house, this Halloween gauntlet of terror. And one by one, hopeful children start entering his house of horrors. And he's kind of watching them on a monitor, and he's pulling all these cables and cranking these knobs. He's got the whole haunted house set up to terrify these kids. And when they're moving through the house looking for the IOU, he's like, "You're getting warmer, you're getting warmer." And then he just walks them right into whatever preloaded spook he has planned for them. And so every time he freaks one of these kids out, they run out screaming or crying, and he runs out after them, cackling. And he likes to see the look of disappointment on the parent's face. And eventually, Timmy Muldoon comes in. And he's flinty. He's full of piss and vinegar. He ain't afraid of no spooks. He's been toughened up by the strap, and he is there to find his father's IOU. And so he makes it through quite a few scares, but eventually it's too much for him. A big mechanical bear comes out. He loses his shit, and he runs out towards his father. And Mr. Hackles cannot wait to see Mr. Muldoon beat the snot out of his kid. But Mr. Muldoon just embraces his child and just comforts him. And that infuriates Mr. Hackles. He's like, "These people are backwards. They don't understand." Meanwhile, at the Wholesome Kipple farm, young Billy vows to sneak out and get his father's IOU. So we go back to the House of Horrors where Mr. Hackles is resetting all of his mechanisms. And they're all kind of malfunctioning. They're going haywire. And when that happens, a woman arrives to trick or treat. And her face is all green and gnarly. She's dressed up like a witch. She's really, really hideous looking. But he refuses to let any adults in. But all of a sudden, she floats up into the air and just levitates into his house. Not only that, she magically makes all of the IOUs in the house fly into her hand. This freaks Hackles out, not because he's afraid of the witch or magic, but because he's worried about his money. So he runs to his safe, and there's like this gross pirate guy in like Mardi Gras beads who's just like hanging out, and all the cash explodes out of the safe and gets sucked across the house. The money goes into this weird tunnel, and there's a devil there, like this satanic figure with this twisted face in a kind of cliche devil outfit, though, which is kind of funny. And he's like, "You're getting warmer, you're getting warmer." And Mr. Hackles, true to form, chases the money all the way to, we can presume, hell? And so right about then, Billy arrives. He's knocking on the door. He's like, "Trick or treat, let me in. I want to find my father's IOU." And the witch comes out. And Billy is not afraid. He's like, "I know you're really Mr. Hackles. Come on, let me in." And then she floats off and dumps all the cash, all the valuables, all the jewels and IOUs on his head. And he's like, "Yeah!" And then the last shot is in the fake cemetery in the front yard. There's now a headstone for Mr. Hackles.
So fucking bizarre. Mr. Hackles, he makes every point to tell us that he never hurts anybody, he never cheats, he never steals, he never lies, he's never crooked. He does everything above board. All he asks is that you give him what's owed. And these people are like, "You fucking miser, you're a piece of shit, I can't pay you, but you're the asshole." And they're like, "I know what you do to the kids." And what he does to the kids is give them the best haunted house in the entire universe. If I was a kid in that town, I'd be like, "Yeah, it's Halloween. We get to go to Mr. Hackles' house." Yeah!
You know, I'm kind of surprised you're taking the side of Mr. Hackles.
He was fucking mensch, dude. He's bending over backwards to give these kids the greatest Halloween ever.
You know,
and he never stole from nobody. It's these deadbeat farmers that can't pay their fucking loans.
He never stole from anyone. However, it is clear that he
And I missed the whole child beating subtext.
is very greedy. He hates everyone.
I think he's less greedy and more wildly mistrustful.
The only thing he does trust is money, which is the only thing
Which he doesn't
which
use.
he loves.
The only thing he uses it for is to build spooky contraptions.
Yeah, which a man after my own heart.
Yeah, I'm telling you.
But
This is my hero.
he hates people, and he not only delights in lording his control and his financial power over them, he likes to torment them through their children, Freddy Krueger style. And, he loves the stress it puts on families.
Yeah. And there's the one thing where he's like, the IOUs are hidden in an obvious place, locked up in his wall safe. Unless
the
you know the
cash is in the
combo.
wall safe.
Oh, cash is
the
in the wall safe.
IOUs were up in the chimney, like up in the flue. When the kids were in there, and he's like, "You're getting warmer. You're getting colder. You're getting colder." One of the kids
He was giving them hints and everything?
No, one of the kids was going towards the IOUs.
Oh, and he was
trying
colder?
to get him off track. So he
that's
was a
that's a
lying
little
piece
mean.
of shit.
Yeah, that's a little mean.
But you know what? He loves Halloween.
He fucking loves Halloween.
Got to give him points there.
Yeah. And kids are little shits anyway. They lie all the time.
Well,
They would have done the same.
they may have, but I
don't
say,
think it was anything worthy of getting murdered by monsters.
He did not get murdered by monsters.
Except he was kind of holding the town down.
Was taken to hell and
By witches and pirates
by
and
witches
devils.
and pirates and stuff.
I was like, oh, the town has, figured it out. They're using his own, tricks against him.
Right.
Way to go, town. But no, it was a real witch. It was a real devil.
A
it
real
was
pirate.
a real pirate. that came out of nowhere. It was like the spirits of Halloween just wanted to save the town.
It was either the spirits of Halloween or, what I said, it was like a Diabolus ex machina. Because they totally set up that Billy, righteous Billy, was going to brave the challenge. And, the rule of threes.
And then he never got in there. He
Girl
never even
came
got
in.
inside.
Yeah, he never even got in and got a chance to prove his bravery and save his father. He didn't do anything. He
No.
was not an active character. In fact, there were no active characters.
Except for our hero, Mr. Hackles.
Well, I kind of thought that if not one of the kids putting on a mask and turning the tables on him, that maybe his contraptions would somehow trap him or kill him.
Sure.
Because they almost set that up where the taxidermied grizzly bear was kind of, that spring-loaded bear was kind of malfunctioning,
Oh.
and it started to growl and come towards him, and he got a little scared. And I was like, oh, okay. But no, instead, witches, pirates, and devils came and took him away.
And so when I realized it wasn't the townsfolk turning the tables, I was
Yeah.
like, oh, is he just delusional? Is he imagining it? But then the witch flew away and threw money onto the little kid.
Yeah.
So it was all real.
Either Billy Kipple went into a fugue state, murdered Mr. Hackles, buried him in his own front yard to get his father's IOU, and the only way he could rationalize it, the horrible thing he'd done, was that it was a witch, a pirate, and a devil. Or
Knowing Romero, that was definitely the case.
it really had the flavor of an old kind of Christian value story where if you're just bad enough for long enough, the devil
be
just
punished.
shows up and takes your soul, which is kind of weird because there's no agency, there's no protagonist, there's no story there. It's just someone is wicked, they are punished.
Yeah.
The end. So in a narrative sense, it kind of totally fell apart at the end.
Sure did,
But
but it was the best part.
It,
Because that witch was genuinely creepy
the
and
witch
scary.
was super creepy. The
All
makeup
she said was
awesome.
trick or treat over
Yeah.
and over again in a creepy voice.
Trick or treat. Trick or treat.
Yeah, the makeup was awesome. The effects, the production design, the haunted house, the monsters and stuff that came out, everything was super cool. But I felt like they were setting up a really good story, and then they just kind of were like, "Oh crap, we got to end this right now." A witch and a pirate and the devil show up. The end.
Like when I write shows. Oh, I'm at page 23. Shit.
The devil. The devil
devil.
comes in and does everything. So there's no character growth or anything like that. They created such a cool setting which was like the mechanical house of horrors, and they created such a cool character, which was Mr. Hackles, who put the kid through a gauntlet and was tormenting the families. That could have been like easily a 45-minute, hour-long episode, and instead they'd like just wrapped it up in 20. My question to you is, how would you have ended it?
How would I have ended it? I mean, I think the kid or the townsfolk would have had to turn the tables, but they also would have had to deserve to turn the tables. Like, you can't just get angry at the guy who loaned you money to bail you out because you can't pay him back.
Well, there is such a thing as predatory lending, where someone with money entices you to take loans at very high interest rates that you can't pay back.
All right, well, you can go elsewhere. You don't have to go to the weirdo on the hill.
You can't go anywhere else.
He has nothing to do with the
town.
banks.
What's
There's
that?
There's got to be banks, and he has nothing to do with them.
Oh, that's true.
So
He doesn't trust the banks.
maybe he was their last resort.
Possibly. Yeah, maybe their credit was so bad they couldn't go anywhere else. But, that one with Mr. Kipple said he wouldn't subject his kid to the House of Horrors, and he's like, well, I may have to raise your rates.
Yeah.
He was pretty shitty.
Well, that's true. I guess talking out of both sides of his mouth, really.
Yeah. He was a piece of
All
shit.
right. Well, fair enough.
We're just blinded by our love of Halloween
Had
and
there
our
been a
desire to go
yeah.
into
I want to go in that house
the
for sure.
mechanical haunted house. Gideon Hackles was played by Barnard Hughes, who was Grandpa from The Lost Boys.
Say hello to the night.
Before we say hello to the night, I have one last question for you, Ryan.
I have another thing to say about this episode, so...
How would you psychoanalyze Gideon Hackles from what they portrayed?
He's like a huge agoraphobe who... Oh, Sidebag, I did think it was funny that... Sidespook, I did think it was really funny that one, businessman didn't have 4 cents to pay for a coffee.
I think he did.
But he deigned to do an IOU instead.
I think Mr. Hackles' whole thing was getting IOUs from people.
Oh,
he didn't
yeah.
just want money. What he really wanted was
Torture their
debt.
children with fun.
He traded in debt, and he wanted to charge interest.
Because he never spent money anyway, so it made no difference to him.
Right. All he wanted was to amass power and fear.
His house was kind of a shithole.
His house was awesome.
Well, it's just a haunted... It's like a mechanical wonderland year-round. He never
It's
takes
like-
any of that stuff down.
It's like Reign of Terror.
I don't know. How would you psychoanalyze him?
Well, he was
He
saying...
has some mild Scroogeism.
I would say he has a pretty advanced late-stage
Advanced.
Scroogeism. He said, you can never trust anyone because everyone lets you down.
He probably got hurt.
I think he got hurt real bad as a kid. The only thing he could trust was money. And he, rants at one point about people buying Halloween costumes and said that, back when he was a kid, they had to make everything out of burlap bags and stuff, which is, I think, the how he got so crafty and good at mechanizing things was that he had to fix, build, and repair everything
Sure.
on his own.
I had a burlap bag costume once.
Sure. And so he came from a scrappy upbringing where he was abused, neglected, abandoned, and realized that if you want payback and power in this life, you don't want money, you want debt.
Yeah.
You want IOUs. And the reason he likes Halloween is because he likes terrifying people.
Let me posit this. What if this is some sort of Wonka scenario where he really needs a protege, someone to pass everything on to, and he's looking for that one special kid who can brave his house of horrors and do what it takes to win.
But he
doesn't have any family or children.
No, he doesn't even have any employees.
And he kind of wants, there's a glint in his eye when that kid says, I can do it. I think he wants a kid to figure it out. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
I like the Dark Wonka
Dark Wonka.
angle.
Or Dwonka, if you will.
The Dwonka angle.
Maybe that's how I'd end the story.
I don't know if I could square that with how much he hates people.
I mean,
and
Willy Wonka's
mistrusts
pretty
them.
fucked up and abusive.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, Wonka's
And
legit
mistrustful.
killing people.
Yep.
Yeah, he kills a lot more people than Dwonka.
Dwonka for the win!
Oompa doompa doopity day, coming to my house on Halloween day.
One night, when I was a child, I had a pop-up book. that was published in 1970, and I hadn't thought about it in a really long time, but this episode reminded me of that book. It was my favorite book, and it was called A Visit to the Haunted House.
Ooh.
And it's these two kids who are friends, boy and a girl, and they decide on Halloween night they're going to go check out the old haunted house, the halfway house up on the hill, because it's halfway between their two towns. And so they get in there, and immediately there's bats, there's ghosts, there's skeletons, there's like a skull falling down the stairs, spooky sounds, rattling chains, and it's a pop-up book, so you're opening the doors, and the chains are coming out, and the skeleton's head is like coming down the stairs, and it was so awesome. When they finally brave the haunted house, what they find is that there's a little old man in there controlling everything mechanically.
There's a Dwonka?
There's a Dwonka, and he's just afraid of people. He thinks they're mean.
Oh.
So he tries to scare them away from his house. And I think this ripped it off, because that was published in 1970, and this is from the 80s.
Oh, this came out in like 83. Interesting. Well, we don't know when
Romero totally read that pop-up book to his kids.
It's possible.
And I went looking for the copy of the book today because my friends are having a baby, and they requested children's books. But you can only get used copies, and I don't want like a copy with snot on it. I don't think it's appropriate to give a used copy to someone's brand new baby.
I agree. However, I kind of want to see this book myself. Give me that snot.
It's Halloween, gentlemen. Halloween! Have you forgotten? My favorite season.
What's behind this door? It's an episode of Goosebumps entitled Attack of the Jack-O-Lanterns. I don't even remember these kids' names. Drew and Drip.
Buck the Truck or something?
Drip Boy. Wiener Dude.
Yeah.
Some guy whose name is inconsequential.
Inconsequential, but you're going to need to give him a nickname. Call him Dirk.
So there's a boy and a girl, main characters. The girl is Drew, and she played the violin girl in Piano Lessons Can Be Murder.
She did?
Sure did.
Oh,
At
man.
least according to various internet sources. Now, I chose this episode because in an earlier episode of Put Up Your Spooks, I mentioned entering a contest to win a walk-on role in an episode of Goosebumps.
That's right.
And that was this episode.
Oh, shit.
And even on the wiki page for this episode, it says one of the trick-or-treaters is a boy who won a walk-on role.
Who was not Ryan Drazi.
Who was not. It says that on the wiki page.
Yeah.
I updated it myself.
Oh, okay.
So there's Drew and her friend, whose name I can't remember, so we call him
Dirk.
And they live in a little town where there's been some disappearances. Or
a town adjacent.
Or a town adjacent to a town where there's been some disappearances. And, I'm not going to do this synopsis justice because it's already cloudy in my mind.
Tell me when you need me to tag me.
Oh, you'll know. You'll know. So it's like the night before Halloween, I believe.
And Drew is pumped. She cannot believe it's almost Halloween. She's losing her mind. She wants to go trick-or-treating. And Drippy Dirk is like, oh, I don't know if my parents are going to let me go out. Those people got kidnapped. And Drew is like, come on. That was like a whole different town. And besides, those were adults that got kidnapped.
That was at least a mile over the county line.
Which is pretty. I admired her chutzpah.
Yeah.
And her
well, it's Halloween.
spirit.
Trick or treats. Yeah. So their friends, Shane and Shauna, jump out of the bushes and scare them. And then two other kids jump out of the bushes and scare them. And they're like, these fucks.
Tabitha and Lee.
These people suck, and we hate them. So let's invite them to go trick-or-treating with us.
And then they're like, peace out, losers. Scaredy cats. And Shane and Shauna are like, oh, man, are those kids still bullying you? Are they still giving you problems, Drew? And she's like, yeah, it's getting worse. I had a Halloween party, and they showed up as robbers, and they tricked me into thinking that they were robbing my house.
Robbers. That's a pretty good prank.
So Dirk and Drew are kind of bummed out that they're just getting harassed by Tabitha and Lee. But fortunately, Shane and Shauna, who used to live in the area, have just stopped by, and they're like, hey, we're going to help you get revenge on those bullies. Why don't you invite them out trick-or-treating tomorrow, and then we're going to play a real good prank on them.
So then they invite them out trick-or-treating, and the Tabitha and
Tabitha and Lee
are like, yeah, we'll go. And then they're like, ugh, are we really going to go trick-or-treating with these lamos? And Tabitha's like, yeah, but they're obviously planning something, so we're going to double-cross them. So they go out trick-or-treating, and this old woman invites them into her house and says, oh, my husband, he loves trick-or-treaters, but he can't come down. You got to go up there. So they go upstairs, and this lady is like Vink Factor 25,000, and she's like, go upstairs, get in there. And I thought she was the voice of the garbage lady from Labyrinth, but she wasn't, because it sounded exactly the same. And so the husband is like a creepy hunchback, like leper troglodyte, who is like, you love Halloween, you're going to be your costumes forever.
And there's a bunch of kids up there in chains.
And Shane and Shauna are in there, and they're like, help us. But then it's all a dream.
What was great about that scene was that we think this is all an elaborate ruse to prank Tabitha and Lee, and they go up into the house and they see Shane and Shauna, and they're like, wait, are these like Shane and Shauna's cousins? Did they invite all these kids into a Halloween party? What is going on? When are they going to reveal that this is a prank? And then it turns out not to be a prank, and they are going to get captured by this leprous troglodyte.
So it's kind of almost a precognitive vision of the future.
Yeah, it's a surreal freak out, and I thought it was actually pretty scary.
Well, that was
weird.
That was like the scary part. Cut to Halloween Day. Dirk and what's the kid's real name?
I have no idea.
Oh, man. Dirk comes to Drew's house, and she comes down. She's Super Drew. He's dressed as Dark and Stormy Knight. He's not even a knight. He doesn't even have armor on. He just has a black leather jacket and a water pistol, which he squirts at Drew's dad. And Drew's dad's like, ho, 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 you sure got me. And then the mom, of course, who's always the heavy on TV, is like, I don't think you should be going out. There's been disappearances. And you're like, oh, that's a whole town over. She's like, okay, whatevs. Go for it. So they go out on their way out to trick-or-treat, and Dirk is still like, I don't know about this, I'm scared, blue, blue, blue. And they're walking down the street, we cut to Tyrell and Samson, Tabitha and Lee, who are like, do we really have to go trick-or-treating with these chodes? And she's like, yeah, but we're going to get them. And then she produces a newspaper printout of the 4 missing people from the next town over, implying that she's gonna make them think they're getting kidnapped or something. I don't know, but it's pretty dark.
Yeah, they're really.
Or maybe they're gonna murder them and leave them in the woods.
Newspaper clipping.
So Drew and Drip, Dirk come up, and they're like, "Okay, losers, what do you got? Let's go trick or treating." And then 2 pumpkin monsters burst from the bushes, and they're like, "Blah blah," and they're like, oh, great costumes. And the pumpkin creatures are like, if you want to trick-or-treat, we know a better place. Tabitha and Neil?
Lee. Tabitha and Lee.
Tabitha and Lee are like, okay, sure, we'll go with you. And the pumpkin creatures take them through the woods into this fantasy realm with like pumpkin lights and streamers and awesome decorations everywhere.
It's like a town that's completely decked out.
The town that Halloween remembered.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, this is awesome. And they rush off to go trick-or-treating, and the people in the houses are all weird. And I thought the people in the houses were the people from the newspaper printout. At least one of them was. But when I went back and cross-referenced, it didn't seem like they actually were. But anyway, these people are like zombies, and they're like, yeah, I don't have any candy. But then they just dump piles and piles of candy into their bags. And Tabitha and Lee...
this is like a perfect Halloween night where not only is everything just completely decorated to the nines in awesome Halloween stuff, but every person in every house is just standing there giving you buckets and buckets of candy.
But it was still like Smarties and lollipops. They still weren't given any full-size Snickers.
Look,
so
Goosebumps is on a budget.
I call bullshit on this town.
No, because there was one house where they were giving out giant novelty-sized candy bars.
Really?
Yes.
I missed that part. All I saw was them like constantly dumping handfuls and armfuls and bucketfuls of small shit, the kind of candy that gathers at the bottom of your sack. And after they leave each house, each person turns into a pumpkin creature.
Yeah, their face kind of shifts and morphs 90s morph into effect. A weird pumpkin
jack-o'-lantern
head.
Yeah. So then they're like, the night wears on, and Tabitha and Lee are so into it, but they're exhausted, and their sacks are full of candy. But every time they turn around, the pumpkin creatures are there. More houses! And they're like, our sacks are full, we can't do any more. And the pumpkin creatures dump the sacks. And then they go, more houses. And the kids are like, cheese it. And so they all run in different directions. Pumpkin creatures are chasing them down. They all gather in a clearing, and the pumpkin creatures get them. And they're shooting fire out of their faces, and they're shooting lightning blasts. And then Tristan and Isolde are like...
Tabitha and
Lee are like, enough is enough. And they try to take the mask off, but it's the whole head comes off, and the mouth is still moving. And it's like, ha ha ha, put on the head. You'll become a pumpkin creature or whatever. So then Tabitha and Lee...
Good job.
...get genuinely scared and run off into the night. And then the pumpkin creatures start laughing, and they morph into Sean and Shayna. Drew is like, oh, you guys, I wasn't sure it was you, but then I thought it was, but then I thought it wasn't. And oh, what a great prank.
And Dirk is
losing his shitting his
minds.
pants. How did you? But who? But what? And then they're like, oh yeah, we're aliens. And he's like, whoa, what?
And Drew is like, oh yeah,
you didn't know that?
My friends were aliens, and they moved away.
They used to be my neighbors.
Then they came back.
And then they're like, yeah, we love Halloween. It's easy. It's really fun to be someone else for a day. And then they pull off their Sean and Shayna masks. And they have weird little green stock heads. And then they're like, okay, well, we gotta go, so we'll see you next year, Drew. And Drew's like, well, sure, you don't want any of this candy? And the aliens go, oh no, we already had our 4-course dinner. We don't eat candy. We eat adult humans. And then Drew's like, what? And they're like, yeah, don't eat too much candy or we'll eat you next year, you bitch. And then they hop on their spaceship and take off. So I was like, what is these pumpkin creatures' plan? Are they going to eat them? No, it seems like they just want them to have more candy.
Keep trick-or-treating.
It's their friends. Okay, I had read a description earlier that said they were aliens, but wait a minute, now they have a third face? And why is their third face a green stalk? Like, wouldn't it have been more natural that they were aliens who looked like pumpkins? Who could blend in on Halloween? And who had to wear human masks or something?
I think that would have been a little too just so.
Too logical?
No, too convenient. I think they were shape-shifting aliens.
Story. Well, yeah, I guess. But they shape-shifted into human form and then tore off human masks. They didn't shape-shift a third time or a second time.
Look, they're getting into Halloween. They love masks. They used to live next door to Drew.
And then I was like, well, are there green stalks the part that comes up through the jack-o'-lantern? No, that's really not the case. It doesn't make any sense that they're weird little green
was
stalk
the
aliens.
lumpy green snake booger heads.
Obviously.
They looked like human children. They could transform into giant jack-o'-lantern-headed monsters with crab claws. Their true form was this kind of lumpy, boogery snake creature.
Green worm.
Yeah, this
with
green
eyes
worm
and Muppet mouth.
Bottle eyes and Muppet mouth. I was really impressed by this episode. It was moving and shaking.
It was
good luck trying to get ahead of this plot.
I think high what the factor on this episode.
Yes. Possibly some of the highest what the factor we've ever encountered.
So I was ragingly disappointed because I watched it through the first time, and I wasn't really paying attention because I was working. And I was like, wait a minute, I missed the part where the kid who won the walk-on role walked on. So I went back, and I found where it would have been, and it wasn't there. Then I went to another upload, and it wasn't there. Then I went to a third upload, and it wasn't there. So what I think must have happened is it got cut for syndication at some point. It would have been the part where they came back from commercial.
Yeah.
And it was just like B-roll of trick-or-treaters. And the kid walks on screen and says, let's go over there, and then walks off. And then we resume the main action. So,
Exit stage left.
When it got chopped up for reruns or whatever, they must have just taken that part out. So we didn't even see the part that inspired us to pick this episode.
Well, I'm glad we did pick this episode because it was awesome. Super spooky, super weird.
I was disappointed in the Halloween energy in the first half, but the second half had it in spades.
From the first second where Drew is like, "Oh man, tomorrow's Halloween. I've got my costume. You got to come out with me. I'm so excited." Halloween energy was high.
Yeah, but they went into the dream house and it wasn't decorated. It was just a gray house and stuff.
No, it was a creepy old lady who lured them.
Well, it was a creepy old house with a creepy old lady, but there were no Halloween decorations or orange lights.
You don't need Halloween decorations when you have a bunch of children in chains moaning and screaming.
Tell that to the Christmas decorations at the hardware store in October, my friend.
When Shane and Shauna first jump out in the beginning, they had a real weird, creepy vibe to them.
When they were pumpkin creatures? Or when they were... Oh, the very beginning.
When they first step out of the woods,
they're fucking
and they're
aliens.
like, "Hi, Drew," and she's like, "Oh, hey," and I was like, what is going on with these kids? Because...
They've been speaking to other aliens all year, so they haven't acclimated to human speak again yet.
But there was a sinister vibe to them. And I was like, wait, are they the bullies, or are Tabitha and Lee the bullies?
Yeah, I did think there would be a twist ending where they ended up eating everyone.
Well, they might yet still.
They may still. That's the sequel.
As batshit insane and unpredictable and erratic as this episode was, I think they were playing fair, because when Shane and Shauna come out of the woods after showing you a POV of the abductor that was kind of tracking them.
Which did happen a lot.
But that was them. Shane and Shauna were the abductors.
Yeah, I suppose they were.
So when they come out and they're acting all creepy right off the bat, that's playing fair with the audience.
With belly full of adult.
Yeah. And then soon after, when Drew is like, "Oh, I'm going to invite Tabitha and Lee out, and I'm going to get my revenge on them," and then she has that weird, surreal nightmare about getting pulled into this Halloween scenario that's much worse than what she imagined. That kind of foreshadows the rest of the episode, because it's not just pumpkin-headed monsters that jump out and like try to kill them and terrify them. Instead, they bring them to a town where trick-or-treating itself is perverted. What they love about Halloween is made into a torture. And the kids are made to trick-or-treat until they are beyond exhaustion and insanity. You know, I think that was giving Tabitha and Lee, these pranksters, a real taste of their own medicine. So I think there was a coherent through line of this plot.
I started to write a script several years ago where they got stuck on a Halloween road, and the people they were trick-or-treating from were like weird, creepy, gray zombies and stuff. I wonder if I just copied it from this.
Ghost Road. I remember it.
Yeah, but I never had a motivation for the villain, and so I stopped after the first act. And then I was watching this, and I was thinking, like, what are these villains' motivation? But then, pranks. It was clear at the end what they were trying to do. But it also leaves you with a real sour note, because now Drew is going to be, like, fucked up for the rest of her life, worrying about aliens that are going to come back and eat her.
She's right to worry.
Yeah.
B, she can prepare now.
I suppose, yeah. She can put some spikes through some bats and such.
Yeah, although...
and they did look pretty... Although they were shooting lightning out of their hands and fire out of their faces, so...
Yes, and they're shapeshifters.
Yeah, you never know. And masters of MI6
were they
masks.
The adults that were in the town, or were those people victims?
I feel like
the guy who
said... I feel like the guy who said, "I'm almost out," was one of the victims on the newspaper, because he looked exactly like him. But then the other people didn't quite look. Like, they had different colored hair and stuff.
Do you think the aliens built that whole town?
I think the whole town was like a magic illusion.
Yeah, it's very possible.
Unless all the victims lived side by side in their houses.
Yeah.
And after being eaten, were turned into pumpkin shape-shifting creatures.
Well, maybe they're devoured slowly, like a parasitic wasp may...
They'd have to keep going back. And if they were still in their own houses, then they wouldn't be missing.
Maybe they had all the adults swap house.
I think we have to imagine that the whole town was an illusion. But if it was, then why would they bother?
Hologram.
Why would they bother turning them into pumpkin creatures as soon as the kids walked away?
It was very mysterious.
Yeah, that part really doesn't hold up.
Very Halloween-y. Wow. So, be honest, Ryan. Would you want to trick-or-treat forever?
My heart is telling me yes, but my body is telling me no.
That's fair.
Because Even as a kid, you're going to get tired after a while.
Yeah. You're gonna have a sugar crash eventually.
Yeah. And you long for the sweet embrace of your own bed, your own comfy, cozy bed, where your feet don't hang over the end because you're not adult yet.
All right, scare factor for Goosebumps, Attack of the Jack-O-Lanterns.
Pretty high.
Yeah, I'd say pretty high. That dream sequence was messed up.
Spooky pumpkins. I don't know.
Okay, gross factor.
The troglodyte was a little gross.
The leprous Luddite troglodyte.
He was all.
You tend to slur.
He was all messed up.
He was all messed up. Okay, what the factor?
I mean, yeah, as we've
Sky high.
Yeah, as we've said, definitely high.
Theme of Halloween.
Couldn't be more. Couldn't be more Halloween.
I don't think it could be higher. Yeah, this episode brought it in a very big way.
Yep,
and
stem to stern.
Stem
to pumpkin stern.
Delighted. All right. For Tales from the Darkside, Trick or Treat, scare factor.
Scare factor, front half, no scare factor.
Okay.
Scare factor, back half.
Not even jump scares?
Nah, I don't think so.
There's that jump scare in the
Maybe
beginning.
when the monster comes out.
Yeah.
Is that what you're talking about?
Well, there's a jump scare in the beginning where he's freaking out
Yeah,
with the
that part.
accountants.
Yeah. But the witch I found genuinely scary.
The witch was really creepy because it was the first adult with really proper
And
horror makeup on.
It was like a little bit psychologically disturbing.
Yeah, where she was just kind of staring and whispering. She wasn't being big and dramatic.
Yeah. The most effective scares in Trails of Terror were the quiet scares.
Yeah, the quiet horror.
The silent scream is the loudest.
So, normally we give a big pass and a lot of leeway. We grade on a curve for Goosebumps and Are You Afraid of the Dark? We're like, well, if you're a little kid, I think this would be scary. I kind of feel like the target audience for this episode were kids. I think the scares the scare factor would be a little higher.
Yeah, no, it was. Yeah, I give it a good scare factor.
All right.
I think Goosebumps was better.
Was scarier?
I think scare factor was a little higher.
Scare factor?
Except that Tales from the Darkside had on-screen implicit murder, and
there was
Goosebumps
no
was
implicit
only
murder.
Gravestone.
Well,
they took him to hell, and then he was dead and buried.
Yeah, they dragged him to hell.
In Goosebumps, they only talked about eating people. Although implied cannibalism is always scary.
Higher body count in Goosebumps.
4 versus 1.
Geez, should body count be a rating?
Yes, it should.
All right.
New rating. Hey, you heard it here first, Spooksters. What do we call our audience? We never came up with that. You heard it here first. Pugilists. Because pugilists are fighters, and it's put up your spooks. And PU is like dead people.
Yeah, PU is dead people. It's smelly people. No, that's terrible. All right. Well, to be continued. Tales from the Darkside, gross factor.
Yeah, pretty low.
Except for the pirate, that was kind of a bit of a leprous Luddite.
Pretty high, because it was like, what? There's real monsters?
The premise of an old miser that has the town in extortion.
Oh, I guess it was just a Halloween version of, like, for real, it was like a Halloween carol. Because we don't question that there would be ghosts.
Except that he's forcing children to participate.
Yeah. Well, he
has them in financial
forces a little boy
bondage.
to buy him a goose.
Well, he's going to pay for the goose. I don't think that's right.
Okay.
Although he does have advanced late-stage Scrooges.
Yep. Scrooge factor high.
Scare factor, mediocre. Higher than it normally would be because I think it's hitting that target audience of kids.
Like a good cup of coffee with a bug in it.
Exactly. Gross factor, low.
Also like a good cup of coffee with a bug in it.
What the factor, I think it was an odd premise.
75%.
Of having this crazy miser who had this haunted house full of contraptions.
Yeah.
Pretty weird. But they also spent a lot of time setting it up.
Yeah.
It's a tradition. He does it every year. He gets off on it. Where it really earns its what the factor is at the end where actual monsters and devils start just showing up out of nowhere.
And he had his hallucination in the beginning with the businessmen, and I was like, ooh, this guy's genuinely crazy. But then he was like, boo-hoo-hoo-hoo, I got you good.
Yeah.
So he wasn't hallucinating, and he wasn't going crazy, but it would have set up nicely.
Unless the whole thing was a Jacob's Ladder scenario and he died alone in his house.
It would have set up nicely him being beset by demons, demons of his own design.
And theme. The theme of Halloween. How well did it fare?
Good, not great. The Halloween was really only at the very end.
Well,
because it was Halloween night for 10 minutes and then he died.
Well, no, it was Halloween the whole time because he surprises the accountants.
Right.
It says it's Halloween.
Right. Okay.
So it
you
was
got a little taste up front.
Halloween throughout. And
Still
it was
no orange lighting anywhere.
all designed around the Halloween and scaring people.
Mm-hmm.
But I gotta say, he was kind of twisting the joys of Halloween for his own nefarious power play.
Yeah. The Halloweenergy was lower than in Goosebumps. Goosebumps made me want to go trick-or-treating, and Tales from the Darkside.
Just minutes ago, you were clamoring to get into Mr. Hackles'
Well,
haunted
I'm not
house.
saying I wouldn't go into his haunted house. We
But
should recreate that
You
for...
were hailing the man as a hero.
He is a hero.
Okay. Well, I think that gives
It's a summer haunted house for sure.
one extra point of Halloween energy. However, I concede this week's Put Up Your Spooks to Goosebumps.
And the winner by a knockout, the Attack of the Jack-O-Lanterns! Trick or treat!
Rerun for your life!